I call the May 7th Assembly Finance Committee meeting to order. Ms. Wendell, will you note the roll?
Thank you, Chair Wall. We have all Assembly members present in chambers.
But no photo can be taken. Is it better than no? That brings us to approval of the minutes. We have the April 30th, 2025 minutes before us. Any changes from the Assembly on that? Seeing none, that is so moved. That brings us to agenda topics. First item tonight is, before I get to the agenda items, I am going to just quickly let you all know that at our last Finance Committee meeting, we made a motion to continue the conversation about seasonal sales tax advocacy at this meeting. However, Mr. Smith and I spent some time with the attorney and the city manager to lay out a timeline that worked. It gave us a little bit more time, so we figured out some loopholes not loopholes, but legal ways to hold that conversation till we had more information. So you don't see on the agenda tonight, but it will be sometime in the future. Okay, so that brings us to manager's proposed increments and budget amendments. So we have a list here in our packet of kind of new proposed increments. There is also in your budget book the increments that were proposed in the manager's original budget. My intent tonight is just to give us some time to ask any last questions. We've talked about some of these things, but we've gotten some more information since then. And so I will just open it up to the body for questions to begin. If we dig into one topic, we'll probably try to stay on that topic, but I'm not going to go line by line through this. Just going to see what questions you have. So I will look for questions. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Jumping down to the bottom, I read the memo on the library and the different scenarios there. I guess I saw that it would be like reductions to intra-library loans and some of those things. I understand the words. I'm just like, I don't actually know what that looks like to a library patron. So I see someone here.
We have Miss Melville.
Yeah, so specifically, I understand reduction of new books and materials, but like no interlibrary loan service. Like, yeah, what does that mean and look like?
So this is terminology that is confusing for many people. And interlibrary loan is when you walk into the library, you look on the library's catalog, and something that you're hoping to find is not there. So what that means is the library you're standing in and none of the libraries that are in that shared catalog have what you're looking for. So interlibrary loan is when we go outside of our system, and systems vary in size. Ours is quite large. And go looking for another library, typically in the country, who has the thing, and then we reach out to them and say, hey, can we borrow that on behalf of our patron? So interlibrary loan is to make up for gaps in your collection. It's to make up for when people want something that you either don't have or wouldn't have in any case. Sometimes they're rare things, sometimes they're out of print things. So it's distinct from a garden variety hold, which is when there's something at the Douglas Library you want. It's just getting sent across town.
Thank you.
We'll stay on this library line item. Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Looking at the FTE reductions in both scenarios, I'm just trying to understand, it looks like even with the scenario one, we're potentially, scenario two, we're losing potentially 2 part-time staff, but also like, is that the only staff we would be losing? Are people's benefits going to be affected even if we don't lose them? Like, just trying to get an impact for library staff. Sense.
So there's two things on the there are two things that are kind of on the chopping block in this situation where we're uncertain about federal funding. There's the interlibrary loan piece, which because that need has been being met by a statewide program, we need some degree of staffing to restore that. That would be in-house. So that's one part. And then the other part that you're seeing is just the loss of the Alex program and what that takes away from kind of our in-house staff time. So primarily what those staff do is they staff that statewide service. And I think what our memo says is the losses to statewide programs and the state library as a whole are kind of outside of our scope. And so what we're presenting you with is the direct impacts that Juneau residents would feel. And that's kind of the distinction. Does that answer the question or confuse?
I think that helps. Just to clarify, so even in scenario two, we're not necessarily losing Juneau library staff. It's just in scenario one, we'd have to employ 2 new staff.
To make up for the loss of interlibrary loan, which we were able to get outside of our entity, we need some time. And then to make up for the time that Alex staff spent on the desks at our downtown library, and to retain hours, to not have a change in hours of operation. Feel free to jump in if I'm...
Thank you. Through the chair, in scenario one, in the funded scenario, we would still be reducing staff capacity at JPL because we would no longer be providing the statewide elements of that program. Does that help?
Mayor Weldon.
Thank you, Director Melville. How many people use the ILL or ILL, however you pronounce it?
So I've been crunching the numbers, and when I looked at what we did for the last complete fiscal year, we did about 390 requests, and when I look at our numbers for this year, we had gotten up to about 250. If we had kept on the pattern that we were on, we would have been coming to about 360 requests for the year. So, and that comes in a variety of ways. Some of that is oftentimes one-time use. So one person had one distinct need and they came in and it was fulfilled, and then a person might be working on research and be needing to do it semi-frequently, but the rate that we were getting requests was coming out to roughly 1 per day.
I'll ask a question. I know this is complicated, but scenario two, I think what I'm hearing is, or what I'm reading, by not increasing general fund support, we would need, not only would we lose interlibrary loan, we would have to close one day a week at all of our libraries. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Does that mean that the cost to do that is $130,000? Like, it seems like the cost to run our libraries one day a week at all locations would be higher than $130,000.
The way that we got to the amount is there's a few things going on there, and I'm looking over Robert's shoulder here at our document. So it's staff time, and that is a large part of the cost, right? The most expensive thing we do is employ people and the benefits that go along with it. If we're going to have interlibrary loan in-house, then, thank you. If we're gonna have interlibrary loan in-house, then what we need to do is go back to paying the costs of having the tool that we use to do that. And the other thing that is included in scenario one is basically, it's showing you what the benefit to our collection expenditure we derived from hosting Alex. So because we have the program in-house, what that meant is we got a boost to our overall collection budget. And so if you look at some of the breakdown here, you can kind of see that some of these costs aren't just the staff time, they're those miscellaneous costs, and to basically to not pass on a reduction in new materials purchasing to the public because of the loss of housing the Alex program.
Questions on this topic, Mr. Kelly?
Thank you. It was rather timely. I was listening to public radio less than an hour before this meeting, and this topic actually came up. And one of the things that I heard in that report was that it's actually unknown, like there's been no communication about whether or not we have these grants. If we were to conditionally go with scenario one, like let's say, just kind of base it on, like, if we don't get the grant, then we will fund scenario one. But if we do get the grant, then we don't need to do it. Then these funds would be unencumbered. If we went with something like that, would that be disruptive at all? Is my question clear? I can try to clarify.
So when we talk about the uncertainty, that is a huge part of this situation. So the thing that is unique about it is that no one has actually come out and said that this money is not coming. What has happened is the federal agency that typically administers these funds, they all got sent home and they haven't been at work. And so we just don't know. And I think the really relevant thing about this particular program, there are lots of things in the library world that are funded by grants like this, but where the project might be flexible or it doesn't operate year round. And the situation that we're in is we've got staff, we've got a year-round service, and so if we literally don't know whether the money is coming or not, then that puts us in this situation where we need to be planning for what happens if we don't have the money. Now, I do think that the actual decision about what we do or don't do if the money suddenly appears is sort of an up the food chain discussion. I know Robert has some thoughts about that.
Thanks, through the chair. It's really hard to start and stop programs like this. It would take a significant amount of effort on behalf of CBJ and the library in particular to re-spool up, rehire staff, reestablish relationships, resubscribe to services, and get that going if this money suddenly appeared. Based on other actions that we've seen out of the federal government thus far that are tangentially related to this action, we don't have a lot of hope or expectation that that's likely to happen. Of course, the federal situation is volatile. There's plenty of pending legal cases. Congress could take action. With all of that, not a lot of expectation on our behalf that we'll be seeing these grant funds restored in a way that would enable us to both quickly restore services and maybe more importantly, have an expectation of continued funding to maintain them going on to the future without having this volatility grant cycle after grant cycle.
Thank you. I think what I'm trying to get at is, would it be helpful to make funding this conditional on not receiving the grants, or would it just be better to have a guaranteed scenario one, like have a guaranteed decision, or if we can make it conditional on not receiving the grants?
Ms. Kester?
In any situation where we receive grant funding that would supplant general fund, we would use the grant funding first, and the surplus would just be part of the lapse that lapses to general fund. So I don't think you need to like make a motion that if you get grant funding for this, don't go out there and spend it twice, because that happens naturally as part of our budget cycle.
Thank you.
Mr. Bryson, then Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What are the hours of operations? I thought it said that it would be closed one day, but I saw a reduction of 35 operational hours. Did I misunderstand that? What hours of operation are you currently having, and what would be proposed if we didn't provide the funding?
So currently, we've got 3 locations, and they're open 7 days a week. And the downtown library and the Valley Library are each staffed with 2 staff at a time. So we are open from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. The Douglas Library is reduced hours, so not reduced, but shorter hours, and operated with a single staff person. So open at 2 p.m. in the afternoon until 8 p.m. And then going into the weekend, all 3 locations are open from noon to 6 on Friday and noon to 5 on Saturday. So when we talk about the time that we had to work with for those staff, how we get to that amount is just literally by looking at what time we had that staff on the desk of the downtown library. And then really, there's all sorts of different ways of reducing library hours. And when we looked at that, part of what we look at is our weekend hours are already not long, and weekends are always also, that's the time when families can often come in together. So when we look at the reduction, we're trying to get to the amount of hours, but also minimize the impact. And there's all sorts of different ways of getting to that total, but some of them are quite a bit more painful in terms of, closing one location a lot, or closing a few locations a little, and just thinking about that impact of when can people really come in versus limiting the impact. I think the other thing, Robert's got his hand up. I think the other thing we also have thought about in past hours for service reduction scenarios is thinking back to COVID. We rotated the closed day around so that there was always a time when some library was open, but choosing a weekday as a closed day just boils down to, otherwise we would be looking at multiple days in order to get to that amount of hours.
Mr. Smith?
I'm sorry if you said it, Madam Chair. How did you want motions to go?
I'm going to ask the mayor to move this whole packet to our budget, this whole package to our budget, and then assembly members will be able to make any amendments that they want.
To that motion?
Yeah,
Okay.
as opposed to line by line.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay, so we're just
it was a
gonna ask
process
questions
question.
on
Right
everything.
now, questions on everything.
Okay,
Yep. We're
sounds good.
go topic by topic, but it looks like Mayor Weldon, you still have a question on this topic? Is that? No. Okay. All right. Moving on from libraries.
One. Sorry.
The library question?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I guess, Ms. Melville, did Anchorage fund, have they made a determination on funding the ILL, or whatever? What? I thought it was a cool acronym. I thought it was a cool.
So just to clarify, the the interlibrary loan service that we were able to use that's operated by the Anchorage Public Library, same funding source. They were dependent on federal pass-through funds. And so they're basically in the same boat that we are, and same situation. It's a staffed service. It operates year-round. And so at the same time that we are looking ahead to July 1, they're looking ahead to July 1. And so it's not a question of Anchorage municipal funds, it's a question of federal funds that we're passing through the state library and being awarded to them.
My follow-up, I guess, is like, if those funds don't pass through, had they made a determination if they would like backfill them with municipal funds? Like we're
No, they have told our staff person that if the money doesn't come, their employment will end on July 1.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Mayor Weldon, a new topic. Thank you, Director Mello.
So my question has to do with the greater item 3. I'm just curious why none of that, or maybe part of it is, and it's just not shown here, is not coming out of fleet maintenance. Whatever fund we call that.
Right, so the way that our fleet reserves work is that departments pay into them over time to be able to fund purchases. So because there was no paying in over time, there is no funds allocated for this purchase in fleet reserves.
Other questions on this topic? Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess for me on this one, okay, maybe let me see how to ask you the question. So wait, am I understanding correctly, I guess, that if we take over the maintenance of this road, we will, I guess, technically be receiving $130,000, $90,000 from Eagle Crest, which I should probably just give right back to them. But, and then 40,000, screw my thing. And then 40,000 from ADOT. So, anyway, I guess I'm trying to figure out how to reduce the, impact on the general fund from this. I had an idea, which was to use the fleet reserve fund and just have those fund sources pay back the fleet reserve, or the fleet and equipment reserve fund. My sense was you didn't like that. Do you have another suggestion? I get it's kind of like moving money around, but I'm like, in the end, it's like we're paying $430,000 out of the fund balance, or it feels like if we use another thing and then pay it back from those other funds, it at least is spreading the cost over 3 or 4 years as it pays it back, and then, we give it to Eagle Crest to pay it back.
I appreciate your creativity because that's exactly what I wanted to do with this request and ask the finance director. And she is going to explain why that does not work from the funds perspective. I do understand your intention of like, hey, we're going to be recouping these funds. So, why do we have to make this capital outlay right now? I think that, my best advice would be to, direct staff to find an alternative funding source through an existing CIP.
So I'll run with the why that doesn't work part of the question. So the fleet reserve is a sinking fund, and essentially every department that has equipment, so whether it's on-road or major office equipment, we have an inventory of those items, and within their operating budgets, departments are making deposits into the fleet reserve in an appropriate amount so that they can, in fact, replace the equipment when their life cycle ends and they need to do the replacement. Those funds we track by department, by equipment. And so if in fact, so we would basically be taking money out on a loan from the fund, which is not really how that fund is supposed to set up. And so if in fact we want to use as a funding source, we really need to forego replacing something else. So instead of replacing grader X, we want to buy a new X for a new grader for this. But that would be a decision that we would, if that's the direction, I think to Manager Kester's point, if the body wants us to find an alternate way to fund the grader, we could look at capital projects perhaps as a way to find some one-time funds. We could work with the Public Works and Engineering and not buy something that we're planning to buy with the intent of kind of making up that money over time. But it really would be a decision of, we're not gonna do this. This gets pushed out, we're not gonna replace this because we wanna use our savings account, well, we've saved up to replace that equipment today on a different thing. And so I think that has to be a very intentional choice because the fleet reserve is so intentional in what's included, how we fund it, the contributions that are made, and just making sure that all of that is appropriate. We track their various funding sources because there are restrictions involved in some of them. So it's, that would be why I would say just deciding to take money out of the fleet reserve isn't a good choice. If we wanted to, if you wanted to direct staff to figure out if we could forego something that's been fully funded, that's a conversation we could have, but that also has operating impacts. So I guess that's what I would offer.
Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Flick. That was super informative or illustrative of that. So, Manager Custer, you said if we were looking for then just an alternate funding source, I want to make sure I understand that comment. So do you think are you thinking about it the same way that you would forego a piece of equipment specifically? Are you thinking of tapping some fund balance somewhere? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think there's two approaches, and I would just need time to talk with Engineering and Public Works about the best strategy. And one would be foregoing an equipment purchase, which it would probably be, I'm going to say difficult, because $424,000 is actually multiple trucks that need replacing on a replacement schedule, not just one. And then the other kind of couch cushion I would look under is CIP projects and bring a policy choice for a CIP project that, much like with Telephone Hill on Monday night, we decided to shuffle some funds around. It would be a decision like that. And I'm sorry, I don't have that on the top of my head. I have spent a lot of time with our CIP projects looking for coins under those cushions. All of our funds, though we have a lot of funds in the CIP, they all have designated uses and policy decisions and their priorities of the assembly. So, but that doesn't mean we can't find $424,000. That's a manageable amount to find.
Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ms. Custer. I think we have probably spent this year more time with the CIP probably on this body looking for cushions as well for change in there. I just wanted to make sure I also understood CBJ will quickly recover the $424K in one-time expenditure. I don't know if that's just me seizing on the word quickly. Could you clarify the way that will happen?
Yes, so DOT has an agreement that they will pay us $40,000 for what they spend on maintaining Fish Creek as a very low priority road. So they're obligated because it's a state road to maintain it. However, because there's no commerce or housing, mostly no housing up there, it's their very lowest priority. Of course, for us, when it snows, it's our very highest priority to be able to get up there. And so Eagle Crest over time has been subsidizing that contract, and DOT has hired additional resources, external resources, to prioritize Fish Creek Road at a higher level so that it gets plowed first thing in the morning. Fish Creek Road needs specialty equipment, a grader, because you can't just drop a blade on a F-350. You know that if you've been up there skiing. So Eagle Crest, about 5 years ago, was paying $50,000 to DOT to plus up the priority of that. Then it jumped to 75. This year it jumped to 90. And when it jumped to 90, we were like, time out, maybe streets could do this more efficiently. we could, if we had some equipment and part-time staff, that also would mean that we could, when we've done with Fish Creek, probably reassign those resources and provide a slightly higher level of service to Douglas. So it just got to a point where staff looked at the situation and said, we think we can do this better, negotiated something with DOT, but it requires this pretty significant capital investment.
Okay, but we're still talking a couple of years, right?
Yeah, correct. And we're talking, okay, so I don't know, 424,000 divided by
Okay, I just,
120,000.
yeah.
20,000 of that 140 would go to the laborer, and the other 120 would go to, general fund, essentially. However, Deputy Mayor Smith made a really good point. 90,000 of that money is coming from.
Okay, that's, yeah, thank you. That's helpful.
Any other questions on this line item? What other questions do folks have, if they have some? Mr. Kelly?
Thank you. I was looking at Mr. Barr's memo on the cold weather emergency shelter, and I was wondering if he'd be able to elaborate on the risks that he identified in the bullet points, the first set of bullet points.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly.
Back at page 5 for everybody.
The first set of bullets, is that what you said? Okay, thank you. So, on the first point, that we may see growth in demand that we are unable to meet in the existing space with the existing operator, that risk, what I was referring to there is a risk that we will see more need for space, more need for more need from the population needing that service than we either have room for in the shelter, or actually more likely than our operator is able to staff to support. On the second bullet point, that the existing operator might not have the capacity, that kind of goes hand in hand with that first bullet point. Our operator did a great job this year, did a great job last year, but does operate by the skin of their teeth. It is really hard to staff that service. It's hard to maintain staffing, and I am in regular touch with them throughout the season, and that is a recurring theme. And the third bullet point just sort of reinforces that again, that it has not been our experience in doing RFPs on this type of service that there is another capable operator in town that we could use instead of our current operator.
Thank you. Has our current operator suggested that they might not do it next year, or are we just kind of highlighting the difficulties and the possibilities?
No, they have not so indicated, the latter. We're just highlighting the challenges and concerns.
Ms. Atkinson?
Thank you, Chair. Well, just to restate what you said to be sure I understood it. I know in a different increment here, we talk about potentially moving things out of storage and thing and putting it into Marie Drake. So the first bullet point is not necessarily that we couldn't meet it with the space available in the facility, but that the current operator couldn't manage a bigger space.
It's a little bit of both, but it is mostly the operating and staffing concerns. So the facility could be expanded. We could fit more cots and associated facilities in that space. That would take additional capital investment. That's all possible. The bigger concern is the staffing.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question on the other part of the memo about the park ranger. So I see it's, increasing one of the staff to full-time to increase park patrols and maintain clean and safe parks. I guess just some questions like, they're just active in parks? Like, I feel like the issues I hear more about with some of the impacts related to homelessness are in other public lands that aren't, a park And I mean, and I'm not saying it's not happening, but the only email I get is about Bishop Kenny Park and the state of repair of that one. I don't hear about any other ones. So I guess I'm just trying to, yeah, just help me understand the big need and what it's, the need and what they'd be doing and why. Give me the pitch.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. So they will be active on primarily parks, playgrounds, and park and recreation managed land, which is broader than just parks. So one of our full-time park rangers right now is completely allocated to our parking garages. So we refer to them as a parking ranger. Our other park rangers are Our other park rangers are focused on parks, playgrounds, parkland, and keeping those spaces safe and clean, and that absolutely involves regularly engaging with folks that are camping in park spaces to maintain cleanliness and have conversations, connect people with services, and when necessary, work either independently or with JPD on enforcement. We do lean on our park ranger staff and our park maintenance staff more broadly when we're engaged in cleanup efforts on and off of parkland. We also lean on our park rangers and park maintenance staff when we're responding to emergencies on and off parkland. So they are focused on park and rec managed land, which is a significant kind of portion of our total land portfolio, but we don't only use them for that.
Other questions on any of these topics? Ms. Hall.
I would be looking at topic number 1 and the sobering center operations. Any updates on that? I understand that Bartlett, as part of their master plan, has already envisioned what they're doing to generate revenue and increase their bottom line with that space. And it was several years that that it was housed there at Bartlett, and I realize things have really changed. So yeah, just an update on that and when we might have a solid number on what will be happening there.
Thank you. So we do have Bartlett staff in the room, and they could definitely speak to this too if there's an interest. I don't believe the number that we will eventually get will require additional money. So there are funds currently allocated to St. Vincent de Paul that we would recover to do the capital types of projects that are cited in the memo under option 3, replacing carpet with hard surfacing, installing some new doors, some security devices, caring for some restroom needs. And separating the space from the orthopedic clinic. So I wouldn't anticipate the need for new capital funding under option 3, assuming that we're still talking about the Rainforest Recovery Center space, the old Rainforest Recovery Center space, actually in this, not that space. That space is currently being used by an orthopedic clinic, but similar space in the same building, the other wing of the building or a portion of that wing. It's possible that we've only had limited conversations with Bartlett. I know that there are some assembly members that have also had conversations since my most recent conversation with Bartlett. So it is possible that there might be an alternative option at Bartlett that is not not in the old Rainforest Recovery Building. It's identified in this memo. I wouldn't necessarily anticipate increased funding needs at other locations, but we would need to do that analysis and look at that once we learned what that might be. So I think that's what I have. Happy to answer follow-ups.
Mr. Steininger.
I just want to flag a potential conflict of interest. I sit on the finance committee for St. Vincent de Paul. I ran that by the attorney, and she said I'm able to engage.
And Ms. Hall.
I should also flag a conflict of interest as I sit on the board of St. Vincent de Paul.
But you spoke with the attorney and you do not have a conflict. Mayor Weldon.
Would it be possible to have Mr. Warner come up and talk to us about rainforest recovery and some plans that they might have for a short-term solution and possibly a long-term?
Mr. Warner.
Thanks for this opportunity. I guess I'll just give a kind of what our short-term plans are for rainforest and what the longer-term plans are for rainforest. So in the short term, we have had conversations with two specialty groups, one being dermatology and the other one being cardiology. Both needed services in the city and borough of Juneau. The two services also have the potential of bringing additional downstream revenue to Bartlett, mostly through lab revenues as they bring pathology specimens or radiology, that runs through the hospital. In the longer term, as we look at our facility, in our last facility master plan, it was pointed out that we need to update our ORs. So our ORs have not been updated in over 20 years at this point. So typically operating rooms are the lifeblood of the revenue sources that kind of drive hospitals and support non-revenue producing services. So as we look at that and we look at the downstream effect of having to, you don't just close ORs, you have to build a whole new set of ORs to be able to expand ORs. So the project would be, when it was envisioned back in 2011, it would be the demolition of the Juneau Medical Center, which houses all Bartlett's clinical, or all of our current clinics. So we have our ophthalmology clinic there, we have our Bartlett Surgical and Specialty Clinic, our oncology clinic. All of those, and if this was to come to fruition, would be rehoused either in the Aurora building, because they are our own services, or in the excess space that is in the Rainforest Recovery Center. There's also some staging things where we have to move services around as we start shuffling some of these services. And so in conversations with some of my board members, we feel that there could be potentially alternatives that would be better suited to Bartlett and to the city in Juneau. And some of those ones that we kind of pointed out was the potentially updating the St. Vincent de Paul space. Bartlett potentially funding that would have to go through my board. The second option we kind of touched base on is we do have a mobile facility that we purchased through COVID funds that is no longer used by Bartlett, that we could potentially donate for that use. It would require some updating. It currently doesn't have any plumbing installed, but it's a good building at this point. So,
Weldon. Oh, sorry, Ms. Atkinson was first, then Mayor Weldon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I saw in a previous memo about the potential for cardiology, and I know that that is a long time need for Juneau, but my understanding was that in the past, we weren't able to bring that to Juneau because we didn't have the population to support that. What's changed on that front?
So it's interesting enough that we were approached by a cardiology group from Anchorage with they want to come to Juneau. And so it's them driving this conversation. So when we looked at that, they've kind of indicated they'd like to start with a week a month, which is kind of small pieces in addition to providing some teleservices. And so the number I provided in the memo of that revenue was just 1/4 of what could be expected if we were able to get to full-time cardiology. So that's the changing.
Mayor Weldon.
Thank you, and thank you for your explanation. So if we went with scenario one, which is to renovate parts of the building of St. Vincent de Paul, with their board approving, of course, would you have temporary place that we could put the sobering center while those renovations occurred?
Yeah, and so the RRC could be potentially used as we do those renovations, and because we'd have renovations going on in the RRC as well. So of the space that was kind of laid out needed for sobering center, there was 1,100 square feet of the 3,700 square feet on that side of the door. So we could potentially be using it for that temporary housing while we start doing some of these updates to bring these services in.
Any other questions on this topic. Any other questions on other topics? And obviously, as motions come up, we can continue to ask questions. Mayor Weldon, go ahead, get us started.
All right, well, I'm gonna probably do it a little differently than we talked because I know someone next to me is thinking. So I would move to approve the manager's proposed increments to the FY '26 budget, except for item 1 and item 3, and ask for unanimous consent.
I see Miss Atkinson and Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Chair Wall. For a question, perhaps for whoever's sitting next to the mayor, are we planning on making motions to deal with those two things in a way that will move it forward tonight? Okay, thank you. I'll remove my objection.
I'll also remove my objection. That answers my question.
All right, so this means that if there are any other changes besides 1 or 3 that you want to make to this, now's your chance to object. Seeing no objection, that is so moved. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will make a motion regarding the Sobering Center. And I move that the Assembly direct staff to find a short-term location for the Sobering Center at Bartlett, using Bartlett Regional Hospital facilities, and work with Bartlett to find a long-term location, which could be located at Bartlett, that may be funded in whole or in part by Bartlett Regional Hospital. I said Bartlett 4 times just in case people were counting.
Any objections to that non-finance related policy question? Ms. Atkinson.
Maybe the maker of the motion will be open to including St. Vincent de Paul in those negotiations as well?
I feel like staff, I can add as many names as
Okay,
we like.
as long as
but
that's
I feel
the
like
intention, I want
staff
that on the
will pull
record.
in right, I think they'll pull in the right places. And, the long-term location, which could be located at Bartlett, could also be located elsewhere. So anyway.
I remove my objection.
Yeah.
Did I see any other objections that I missed? No. Okay, that is so moved. Mayor Weldon, do you have another motion? Or Mr. Smith?
Thanks, Madam Chair. I would move item 3, except I would change the funding source to, and I don't love to do this, but just trying to protect the general fund, to direct, so I'd move item 3 for the $423,000, but I would direct staff to find a CIP or alternative funding source in the general fund, knowing it will be repaid, quickly, 4 years, with mostly our money. But.
I think we will, maybe that's not putting it, well, I'll turn it over to staff. I think, is that motion clear, or do we need a bit more direction on what we just asked for?
I guess I would ask a clarifying question. If staff are able to bring you some options for next week, is it, we can take that motion, is it more appropriate to move the 423 to the pending list that we'll deal with next week and bring back a funding source, and you can disposition it from the pending list at that time?
Very smart.
Do you want to make that motion?
I'll withdraw
just
that motion, and I would move item 3 to the pending list with the request to staff to find an alternative funding source.
Excellent. Any objections? No. All right. That's so moved. Good job. We're going to take a break now because our next item will be similarly lengthy, I think. And so take 7 minutes, 6:29. We'll be back here. I'll bring us back to order. That brings us to the agenda topic number 3, capital improvement plan amendments. And similarly, we'll open up for questions first, and then we'll move the whole thing and see if anyone's got any amendments. So any questions on the CIP? We've seen this a few times, but you know, there's a lot going on, so. Ms. Atkinson, then Mayor Weldon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question regarding the manager's office tenant improvements of 3.3 million. I know that is a 3.3 million set aside for once we've acquired the building, doing the things to make it, you know, a better office space. But just to refresh, at the current amount we're planning on acquiring it for, maybe not the final amount, what's the total project cost going to be, including that?
There's about 14.5 million in existing city hall accounts. And so then adding that 3.3 million brings it up just shy of 18 million, 17.8 million. And as a reminder, that additional funding in the manager's proposed budget allows us to do a reverse floor plan of the building. So instead of just keeping the same like fancy offices around the perimeter with windows and cubicles in the middle, we would reverse that and kind of give people as much light as possible. So there is a kind of cheaper version of a remodel that's just like carpet and paint.
Mayor Weldon.
I was just wondering what's happening with a strikeout item, the Statter Harbor office new roof. Is that being postponed? Did they find other funding?
Great question, Mayor Weldon. This is all about timing. And so I believe on May 19th, you will see an ordinance that, or a transfer that cares for this 250,000 in FY25. So therefore, we don't need it in FY26 because they're able to do that sooner than we anticipated.
Mr. Smith. I have a question while Mr. Smith finishes his dinner. Mayor Weldon.
My question has to do with, so section D, item 3, page 11, I guess. On the school district, the JSD building facility maintenance, is this the $1 million that we're giving them annually for maintenance, or is this something different?
Yes, the school district's ASD buildings facility maintenance is the 1 million that's part of the 1%.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 5, actually the same section where the mayor just was, there's manager's office IT. I guess I was just kind of curious, like, do we fund that through interagency stuff, or is it just? Sorry, I'm looking at a different package. I'm on page 5 of the draft CIP. Sorry, you're right. Page 3. I have my notes on a different packet. I'm sorry. So there's 750,000 for IT. Do we do CIP investments into IT all the time? It's not through, and then probably some interagency. And then just to confirm, it's also like a pit we just dump money into a lot. Is that true? Oh, I just wanted to see if there was a confirmation that IT is like also just a pit we dump a lot of money into a lot. Okay, just thanks.
Madam Chair, that might not be how I would describe it, but IT is a major significant internal expense that we have. We do have capital expenses in IT that take the shape of organization-wide, system-wide software implementations generally. So you can think about, we're in the middle of one right now that would revamp the way that CDD processes and shares with the public all of the permitting work that they do. It's a major lift across the organization. We're also in the middle of an IT software project that would replace and improve the software that is used in the assessor's office. Next year, we're queued up to be shifting our time and attendance software from an on-premises solution to a cloud-based solution, which we're only quasi-excited about, but required to because the support for the on-premises version is ending. So there are projects like that every year that are expensive.
Mr. Smith.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Obviously, the other night we made some decisions on Telephone Hill and moving CIPs. Do we have a rough amount that we're expecting to expend at Peterson Hill in the upcoming fiscal year? I mean, obviously you're, I think, moving 2.2. Anyway, I guess, is that like, do we know that's the work that needs to get done, or are we kind of just thinking we know some work and then planning ahead? Anyway, just curious if you have a better estimate on Peterson Hill cost for 26. Thanks.
Yeah, so the work that we need to do in the next year for Peterson Hill, which is mostly planning and development work, I think we want to make sure there's like $300,000 to $400,000 in the fund remaining for that. This CIP does include a transfer of $1.85 million into Peterson Hill as part of the 1%. That was not mentioned in the Telephone Hill memo, mostly because I just totally forgot about it. And that is just part of the Assembly's priorities of continuing to put money into Peterson Hill because of it's going to cost a lot to build the road in there. And so that's the kind of putting money aside year after year through the 1%.
All right, Mayor Weldon, will you get us started with the motion here?
Certainly. I move the CIP with the amendment with the Saddle Harbor office new roof to the full assembly
Staff, is that an appropriate motion?
Because it has to go to the assembly to get voted on.
That is a fantastic motion.
Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Is this the part where we can object for amendments? Perfect. I would move an amendment striking the 3.3 million for tenant improvements. If I could speak to my amendment, thank you. I think, as we mentioned, a lot of us were going through.
And maybe just because there's a lot in this, you could point to it in the packet for people so they know.
Yes, it's on page 2 of the CIP. It's under the general sales tax improvements, second from the bottom. Hopefully that helps folks. Page 10 on the packet, page 2 of the CIP in the packet for today. Perfect. Thank you. Like a lot of folks, I was looking around for extra cash, and one thing that was hanging over my head in particular this year, especially considering the national stage and potential recession and things like that, something that really was hanging over me was the restricted budget reserve and how much we are behind on that. And so my intention with this would be to move, later in the meeting, move that 3.3 million to the pending list with the intention of putting it into the restricted budget reserve. We have a lot of money in the CIP for the new city hall, and that's also a discussion we haven't fully wrapped up yet. And so currently, especially considering our constraints on the budget, putting 3.3 million aside now feels premature, and I think would be better in the restricted budget reserve. So that's my amendment.
Mayor Weldon, do you have an objection?
I do have an objection. I appreciate Ms. Atkinson's sentiment, but if we move forward with this project, I believe we only have $10 million put away, and the costs of purchasing this is $12 million, so we're already behind $2 million, and we also have to do tenant improvements that are probably anywhere between 3 to 5 million. So it seems unreasonable to me, knowing that we're going to have to expend these money to take it from that item.
Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Right now, I'll just interrupt for a question to double check what the mayor just said. Manager Custer, you just said 14.5 million is the cost. If you could just rerun through those numbers.
And I'll just, as a disclaimer to me, the mayor did steal my CIP document today. But, no, just, there's $4.5 million in a city hall, in a new city hall CIP, and $10 million in a city hall CIP. So those two line items combined are $14.5 million. The additional 3.3 million is what we need to do include tenant improvements. So her sentiment is absolutely right. We believe we need those funds to do the requested tenant improvements. Of course, we haven't finished any negotiations. If you recall, our last offer, our first official offer, was appraised value, which was just shy of 10 million for the Burns building. However, in earlier conversations, they had offered it to us for 12. So, we're just kind of trying to make sure that we have enough funding to be able to both purchase and remodel that facility.
Mr. Steininger.
I'm just going to speak in support of this amendment, not because I don't think that we should renovate the building should we buy it. Just I think it's a little, premature since we're still in the process of negotiating the price of the building and the purchase of the building. We don't have our hands on the building to really have a good, robust, estimate on what the cost of the renovations will be. And I think at that time would be a more appropriate time to come back and see if we're wrong to stick it in the restricted budget reserve if that amendment happens.
Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll try to keep my comments brief because I'll also be speaking in support of this amendment. I had similar thoughts. I'm looking at this more from an angle of the focus on the national stage and concern that we may be going at our own way for quite a lot of needs, and knowing that while these tenant improvements, I love the concept and I love that they're worker centered, and I think maybe we end up making them anyway, but the building is already one in which state office workers were recently working, and so it may be that some things are more spaced out over time. And I think just waiting a little bit, and then if we're wrong, we can always allocate those funds. I won't speak to the restricted budget reserve part of it, but I think in terms of kind of keeping our powder dry, I think someone said earlier in this process might be smarter.
Mr. Bryson.
Thank you. Our restricted budget reserve has been underfunded since the mayor became mayor. It's been a perennial conversation. While I hate to see a project like City Hall that we spent so much time on to be the person who gives up or the project that gives up his funds so that we can protect the budget, restricted budget reserve, but this is the best plan that I've heard so far to get the restricted budget reserve to the level that, like, our own ordinance says that it needs to be at. So I'm absolutely going to support this. Thank you, Ms. Atkinson.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I completely understand, and I think the staff is doing the right thing by making this appropriation. They're looking at the numbers, looking at what it would take to do it and get it ready if and when the agreement is done. So you did your job, and my vote is not an indication to say that I think you should have done it differently. I kind of think, let's see what happens with the negotiations. Maybe I'm wrong. It just doesn't seem to be moving at a rapid pace. So anyway, just wondering if it needs to be expended now, or we can expend it when we settle on a number, we settle on a negotiation. And I would say that I want to do these improvements so that people, the staff, have like a well-done office space and not, something that was from like the 90s or whatever, and weird offices all along the windows. Like that is the improvements will make it better for like the working, our all of our city staff, and not just like, oh, leadership is it's the C-suite offices. So they're doing the right thing. I'm going to support this though, and we can look at finding some more money for tenant improvements at a later time. So thanks.
Mr. Kelly, then Mayor Weldon.
Actually, I think I'll let Mayor Weldon go first.
I'll speed this along. I can count the votes. I'll remove my objection.
I love it when I don't have to vote. Wait. All right, so we have no objections. Any objections? All right, that is so moved. All right, that is one amendment. Any other CIP amendments? Or amendments to the motion? Mr. Smith?
Sorry, it was just for a question. Even though the marine passenger fees are part of the CIP, we're going to address those in a separate section, right? Okay, very good. Thanks. Just wanted to confirm that I was on pace.
Yes, this is, if are there any objections to the main motion? Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, I lost a beat for a second there. I am objecting, I think, mostly to give the body the heads up. As you guys know, I was less present than I would want to be at all of the meetings of last week and earlier this week. And so I missed that you did pass the drafting of bonds for education. I was off the call at that point. It had been my intention when I was looking at those funds that we just deappropriated, I had been looking for a place within the CIP, if we did not do education bonds, to put an education project or two from the list, because I think the way we know that costs escalate, the longer we don't do them, and some of them are roofs, I think we should consider just building it into the CIP this year. I think we may need to do that, and I may still be pursuing that, but I was traveling back to town today, and I wasn't able to pull the lines together in time to say, I'd like to amend it and add this, because I don't have this ready. But I just wanted to let you all know of that intention.
Hughes Candies, and of course that is a motion you could make at any time too, if you don't get it into the budget, perhaps when we make a final decision about what we are doing with that bond. All right, any other objections? Seeing none, the CIP is so moved. That brings us to the school district budget for action. This was a little confusing to me, so maybe I can ask staff to repeat what action we have to take tonight on, or what options we have tonight on regarding the school district budget, because I know it's always on a different timeline than the rest of the budget.
Thank you, Chair Wall. What we have before you tonight is the $75,000 increment to the above the cap funding related to food service and community schools requested by the school district. And so this was included in Mr. Hauser's presentation. way back on April 5th when we were introduced to the budget. And this is the final piece of their budget in order to, and I'm looking at page 15 on your packet, which outlines the school district's request for funding. And that will allow us to basically take on page 16, your ordinance serial number 2025-02, and have action on that on May 19th to meet the required deadline for the school district.
Mayor Weldon, do you want to get us started with the motion and then we can entertain questions or?
I think this is actually going to be two motions, so I'll do the first one.
Okay.
I move ordinance number 2025-02 to the full assembly.
Any objections to that? All right. Oh, Ms.
And
Ms.
I was just
Wendell.
making sure, Ms. Flick, or Director Flick, do I need to move the pending list also? Correct. Okay.
Yes, if the action on, if the body approves the pending list request, it will make the item that you just approved to go to the full assembly amended. So we would give you the amended ordinance if you approve the increment.
Got it. I just did them out of order. Apologize for that. So I would move the let's see here, the outside of the cap list of $2,115,000 to the full assembly.
Any objections? Mr. Smith, then Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for the purposes of a question, when we approve the outside, the cap funding for a year, what happens the next year when the manager's proposing their budget? Anyway, I'm just trying to decide, like, if we say we increase it by 75 for a few years, will the manager's proposed budget include those increases, or does it reset to a kind of a base?
Excellent question, Assemblymember Smith. So typically, we would include that as an operational increase, and depending on the direction that the assembly gives the manager at the winter retreat, if the direction is keep it status quo, it would be included in what becomes status quo for the next year, unless you specifically say, we want to do this one time only, and then we would kind of reset with the school district as they build their budget. But typically, when they're requesting these are operational funds. So we would treat them as recurring. And so if you approve them now and give direction in the winter to do status quo or whatever you give us to do, we would just move with that being the status quo.
Mr. Kelly.
Thanks. I just have a parliamentary inquiry. I heard two motions made. I didn't hear anything withdrawn. Is what the second one an amendment to the other motion, or was it the mayor's intention to withdraw the first motion?
I thought the first motion was approved because nobody objected.
There's multiple ways to do this, and so she's moving the amendment now.
This motion was approved?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I just did them out of order accidentally. So it will replace this line, right? Special revenue, I believe, line.
Correct. For clarification, if this motion, which is to approve the full $2,115,000 for the school district above the cap, which is an increase of $75,000, which is the increment you see on your pending list, if you decide to pass that, then when ordinance 2025-02 comes to you, in the middle where it says transfers in, it's got operations of 35 million and special revenue of 2 million. That would reflect the 2,155,000 that you're talking about now.
Thank you.
Any other objections or any objections? All right, seeing none, that is so moved. Flying tonight. This brings us to passenger fee plan. Okay, let's. Um, all right. We've chatted about the passenger fee plan, but an opportunity for any last questions. Maybe the mayor can make us a motion, and if folks have questions, we can deal with them then.
You want a motion first? So I would move the marine passenger fees to the full assembly just to the full assembly. I have lots of questions, so.
All right, what questions do we have? I see Miss Hughes Scandies. No questions. Mayor Weldon.
Thank you, and I have talked to Ms. Pierce about this so she can explain it. So, what I had trouble with is on page 20, the totals didn't seem to make sense, with the amount of money we were bringing in. So if she could address that so everybody understands that.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through the chair. When we presented the initial passenger fee budget to you, the Assembly had not made some of the operational decisions, particularly related to the communications department, some of which is tourism related and a portion of which is funded by passenger fees. So the passenger fee budget that you were initially presented with included the projected total, or equaled the projected total amount of passenger fees that we were expected to take in. With that addition, it now comes to, I think it's like a couple $100,000 over what that projected total number would be. So, the Assembly has a couple options. Passenger that can either come out of passenger fee fund balance. Again, that's a projection, the projected total is a projection based on the number of passengers that we anticipate. Or I had asked finance staff to split the kind of money off the top of the budget that were based on the requests that we received between the Seawalk and Shore Power. So if the body wants a passenger fee budget that perfectly matches that total, you're welcome to kind of erode away at either of those two line items. As I mentioned at the COW previously, those are both very large ticket items that will likely require a conversation about debt service in the very near future. So, funds here and there probably will not make a substantial difference in how we approach that conversation.
Miss Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I had a question on the Clean Technology Revolving Loan Program. I'm assuming your little note there means we haven't found an organization to administer it. I just want to double check, is that because we're waiting for it to be approved before we go out and find it, or is there another hang up? I just don't want us to be appropriating $1 million that ends up going nowhere.
Thank you, Ms. Atkinson. Through the chair, that money was actually already appropriated last year. We didn't use it, it lapsed back, so we're reappropriating it. And the reason why is, as staff discussed this program, and then we made the decision between the staff and the Assembly to reconvene the Visitor Industry Task Force, or kind of have VITF 2.0, if you will. That was a really appropriate forum to discuss the terms of that program and kind of design what that program might look like, given that we'll have a committee to discuss that out in the open rather than staff kind of sitting around coming up with terms by ourselves.
Mayor Weldon.
Madam, I have prepared Ms. Pierce for this question too. Our crossing guard program last year did not fulfill their contract, so I'm asking her to work with Juneau to do an accounting of FY25 and FY26, because there's got to be money that lapsed there. and I would like to see where that went.
Objections to the motion? Oh, I think it got moved, right? Yeah, so that's, so yes, opportunities for amendments now. I saw Ms. Huskitties and Mr. Smith and Mayor Weldon.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for watching out for me when I keep zoning out. I got up at 2:30 this morning, so I'm a little tired. Yes, I am looking at page 20 of our packet. I'm looking at third-party visitor services by Assembly Grant. And I'm looking specifically at the lines, starting with AJ Dock, access control security, all the way through Franklin Dock, restroom security, just to do this in one go and make it easy for us. So my amendment would be to strike these lines. If you've been on the Assembly for a while, you're familiar with my argument here. When we adjusted our own dockage fees, this was not a process where we could direct staff to say, hey, go ask Franklin Dock what they charge for their dockage, and go ask AJ Dock what they're charging for their dockage. And the reason we can't do that is because they're private businesses. It's a competitive thing. It's proprietary market information. And so for me, I do not understand why we, on one hand, are dealing with those hassles, which are totally free market, normal, to be expected. And then we turn around during the budget process and we make a grant for them to take care of their restroom maintenance, which is $30,000 here, to take control of their own security, which is $150,000. So it just doesn't make sense to do this grant this way to me. And so I would move to strike.
Mr. Bryson, you have an objection to the amendment?
Yes, Madam Chair. The reason why I'm gonna support these is that the people that are paying, we're getting the $5 per person. The people that are paying and using those we're still getting the $5 per person. So whether they use our docks or they use somebody else's docks, $5 is still coming into the community for services for those people. So to only restrict those funds for just the people that utilize the Juneau dock does not seem like a fair appropriation of those. We're getting paid because those tours are coming in here. So we're using that money to fund those services connected to those people. So I'm going to have to maintain an objection. Thank you.
Mayor Weldon.
I object for many of the same reasons Mr. Bryson does.
Mr. Kelly.
Just a clarifying question. Could Ms. Hughes-Candies repeat which line she's proposing to strike?
Say that again, Mr. Kelly?
Could you just repeat what you're proposing to strike?
It is a restroom and security that goes to the two private docks. So there's not a line number, but it's 150,000, 30,000, 150,000, 30,000. And it's in the third section here.
Thank you. I see it now. Thank you.
I'm going to object for a question. Ms. Pierce, my understanding is we had a conversation about raising our dockage fees and how we were going to address use of funds in the future to pay for these things. My understanding is, based on the direction the Assembly gave you, that this would be the last year that these items are included in the marine passenger fee budget. Is that your understanding as well about the direction that was given by the Assembly?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That is my understanding. And it gets a little bit confusing with calendar years and fiscal years, given that the cruise season spans 2 fiscal years. So you will see in my memo, I outline that if, unless directed differently by the assembly, the staff will write the MOAs with the private dock owners to only cover expenses for calendar year 25, understanding that dockage fees increase starts in calendar year 26. So, unless directed differently by the assembly, that's the approach that we would take. Of course, we don't have an accounting for how much money that would be for the calendar year, so we kept the line items the same as in previous years in order not to confuse things and guess.
Thank you. I'll maintain my objection. I 100% agree with Ms. Hughes-Scandy's philosophy, and I feel like we've cared for it in the appropriate way by making that direction earlier this year to change our practices. So I'm comfortable with it in for this year and will not be in the future. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we use these same types of fees for city docks, even though we collect dockage fees at our docks. Obviously, the attorney isn't here tonight, but having that discrepancy, if like these were to go away, does that present legal risk to us at all?
Through the chair, without getting into a legal realm, which I am not qualified to get into. In the in Judge Holland's ruling around our passenger fee lawsuit, which I conveniently reread 2 days ago, it states that it is legal for us to provide passenger fee funding to the private docks. It doesn't say that we have to. It says that it's legal for us to collect the fees. It says that the fees need to be in service of the vessel, and it says that it's legal to use the fees at private docks. It doesn't get into whether or not there could be a legal challenge, or we would survive a legal challenge on if we no longer collected those fees at private docks. So without any legal qualification, I'm going to leave my comments there.
Ms. Wendell, we have an amendment and an objection. Will you call roll?
Thank you, Chair Wall. On the motion to amend the passenger fee proposal by striking AJ Dock and Franklin Dock funding allocations for access control, security, and restroom maintenance. Assemblymember Hughes-Scandies.
Yes.
Assemblymember Bryson.
No.
Mayor Weldon.
No.
Assemblymember Steininger.
No.
Assemblymember Hall.
No.
Assemblymember Smith.
No.
Assemblymember Kelly.
Yes.
Assemblymember Atkinson.
Yes.
Chair Wall.
No.
Motion fails, 3 ayes, 6 nays.
Mr. Smith next with an amendment, I believe, in my list here, if you're ready.
Madam Chair, I actually still had a couple of questions, if that was okay. So I can object. I'll object for a question then. So, Ms. Pierce, I was tracking a little bit with the we're showing that we're expending more than we expect to collect, but then we didn't spend some from last year, so we carried that forward so is that like the main reason we're promoting expending more than we're collecting, and because we have a fund balance, and can you let me know what should this be approved at this level? Do you happen to know what our fund balance would be at the end of 26? Anyway, I'm just trying to I have an idea for an amendment. I'm just trying to decide if I need to cut something else or if there's some funds available. Anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. And through the chair, the passenger fee projection that Ms. Wendell sent to me on March 6th shows a projected fund balance of $1.4 million, which is well in excess of what we're proposing. The reason that the budget that you see tonight slightly exceeds the amount that we had proposed to collect is because of the approval of the communications department. So with that passenger fee funding added to the budget that the assembly had signed off on, it shows a slight excess.
Mayor Weldon, then I'll go to you.
I'll object for purposes of a question too. It has to do with the Downtown Business Association Ambassador Program. I can't remember how much they were asking for and what their breakup of their ask was.
Thank you, Mayor Weldon. Through the chair, I don't have it in front of me, but it is $75,000 to fund the Downtown Ambassador Program. We do have some representatives from DBA in the audience tonight if you want to take a deeper dive into questions. Just because there is a memo to file about, or to red folder about this, and I've had discussions with a few of you about this line item. You may recall that last year when we discussed the Downtown Ambassador Program appropriation, the Assembly made it clear that it was a one-time expense. So I had originally submitted my passenger fee, my recommended budget, the blue highlighted spreadsheet that you received showing the all of the requests and the things that we had proposed to fund had included that. After a staff discussion, we recalled that direction from the Assembly and removed it. That said, if the Assembly would like to move forward with funding that program, it's your discretion to do so.
Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So in that, it's like if the assembly, so I guess if the assembly moves, you need it to be made a recurring item for you to add it back in the future, or I guess I'm just kind of determining anyway, how does that?
So through the chair, the reason why it was done this way was because it was explicitly discussed as a one-time expenditure. I think, in the future, I would make the assumption to carry things that we funded in the past over and let the Assembly remove them if you choose. This time, because of the way that it was discussed last year, that was the approach that staff took based on that direction. But if you decide to add it back into the budget this year, then, I would make that assumption when creating the budget going forward.
Mayor Weldon.
Thank you. So as I recall, our problem with it last time was it involved maps. And since we were already paying Travel Juneau for maps, we didn't want to pay for maps twice. So I don't know if anybody from the Downtown Business Association can step forward and give us a breakdown of the $75,000 so it doesn't include maps.
Before you go out there, I'm just gonna take the temperature of the body here because it is not necessarily our practice to invite partners up at this stage, but we can. And not that I don't want to hear from DBA now, but it does, it is a precedent. So I just want to see if anyone's uncomfortable with that. Go ahead, Mayor Weldon.
Thank you for that, Madam Chair. That's why you're an awesome chair. So we can move this forward because we can always add it at the Assembly. So I would have those numbers ready. For the Assembly.
All right, so you're asking for a pause in the conversation.
No, I don't want to set a precedent by having people other than staff that are coming forward. So, and then we will have another chance at this at the Assembly level. So I will chat with the Downtown Business Association between now and then.
Mr. Smith.
I'm just gonna make a motion and then we can get, and if we don't have enough, information. I mean, there was a submission in a previous packet. I think we've heard about the program. We have some fund balance. I will move that we add a $75,000 addition to the marine passenger fee proposal for the downtown ambassadors.
Are there objections to that motion? Mr. Kelly?
Could I get just a 2-minute at ease? Thanks.
2 minute at ease. Are you ready? Okay, so we have a motion. Are there objections? Oh, Mr. Smith.
I realized I forgot a piece of my motion.
You can withdraw and give us a new one.
Motion, and then I'll try again. And I would move that we add 75,000 marine passenger fees to fund the downtown ambassadors program with the intent that the program seeks to reduce impacts on city staff regarding tourism questions at the cash office in the downtown transit center, which, if anyone has questions on that, it sounds like they get a lot of questions at the cash office. And anyway, and I've spoken with the group. They're open to looking at creative ways to try to reduce that impact and not require like another person to work at the cash office. Okay.
Objections to the motion? Mr. Steininger.
Non-objection, but I need to declare a potential conflict of interest. My partner sits on the DBA board, but I've spoken to the attorney and I'm okay to participate.
I'm going to object just for a question. We kind of just talked about this, but this is just thinking forward. Ms. Pierce, it surprised me a little bit about your answer regarding when you include things moving forward and when you don't. I was under the impression that you, as the director, make your recommendations based on your understanding of the issues Assembly wants, the community feedback, as opposed to any specific motions the Assembly made the year before. Maybe I'm splitting hairs. I would imagine it's more of a balance than kind of you need direct from us. Like there may be a time when the Assembly didn't say stop it in 3 years and you decide it's not worth including. Is that correct?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Your assessment is entirely correct. The nature of the discussion last year and the discussion that we had among manager's office staff, I didn't make this decision in a vacuum, consultation between the people sitting up on this dais, was that the conversation was very much that it was considered a one-time expense. The Assembly doesn't typically have those types of conversations. You don't typically say, for example, this year you're talking about private docks and you're talking about, not expecting to see that on the budget yet next year. That was the type of conversation that you had about DBA last year. So we heeded that and made the budget accordingly. Typically, the way that you assess the way that the budget is developed is correct. We don't go through and split hairs on every comment that's made by the Assembly. It was more the nature of the direction last year.
Thank you for that. We have an amendment. I haven't seen any objections, so that is so moved. Which brings us back to the original motion. Yep, I want to make sure both of those folks got their amendments in that had their hands raised. Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move an amendment to the capital investment section of packet page 20. And I'm looking 4 up from the bottom, the covered bus stop at Mendenhall Loop Road for $70,000. I would move to strike that. I asked Director Pierce some questions about it when we had the opportunity to go over the recommendations earlier in our budget process. And I asked Manager Custer some questions about bus stops and covered bus stops in the borough more generally. Today, my issue is that we have looked at this as a body to try to figure out how we try to deconflict the tourists that are riding our public bus system from our residents who use it to commute and go shopping and so on. If you live out in the valley and you drive out that way, then you see that it still gets a lot of use, and you will see a clump of folks at that stop who are not there the rest of the year round. I feel like I may have used the word incentivizing earlier in the budget process, and Director Pierce said that's not how she makes her travel plans. You don't go to a place because there's a covered bus stop. That's not a hot tourist commodity. So I understand the humor there, and it's not that I think it's that. I just, when I look at that bus stop in general, and I look at how it fits into our general capital transit system and how we address our bus stops and which ones we're covering and which ones we're not, I don't think I can make a straight face claim that this is, to me, it seems like more putting energy into there where I don't think it belongs. So I would move to strike it.
Objections, I see Ms. Atkinson and Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand where Ms. Hughes is coming from, and I agree. I think moving this forward, I don't see this as the end of this conversation, because if we're gonna have a covered bus stop here, I would like to see it everywhere in Juneau, which is a different conversation, but I would rather put this in now with marine passenger fees and then have a broader discussion later than to strike this and because of incentivizing or preferring or whatever you want to state it. I think that covered bus stops are always a good thing, and I would like to see this move forward.
Mr. Kelly.
I don't think I need to repeat Ms. Atkinson's statement. I think I feel much the same sentiment. Thank you.
Mayor Walden.
I'm going to shock Ms. Hughes Candies and agree with her on this one. I live just down the street. There is a covered bus stop there already. So the locals do have a covered bus stop, but there are a lot of people standing there in the rain that are tourists. And her stated intention of what the marine passenger fees for caught my attention, as she's actually correct on this one, and I would support her motion.
Yeah. Expense. Ms. Hughes Candies. Oh, sorry, did you have a?
Oh, yep. Thanks. Just because to Ella and Paul's points, I was just going to share what the manager kindly gathered for me. We have 142 total bus stops. 51 of them are covered, so we have 91 that are uncovered. in case you're wondering.
Mr. Smith, then Ms. Hall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I also find this an interesting idea, and I see some logic in it. I'm going to vote against just because I don't want people to get all wet out in the rain. And just one other reason is I do wonder if, the further these funds go away from Zone A, does that help us in the future?
Ms. Hall.
And I too drive by that, or drive through that intersection multiple times a day. And so just a question, where would the bus stop be, on the other side of the road for the covered one? Okay. And I see this as an opportunity to benefit the locals using these fees. So I see it as a good thing to, if we can build it, let's do it.
Mr. Bryson.
Mr. Scandies is on to something here. I'm going to support this as well, knowing that we have 91 uncovered buses, and our bus system serves some of the most economically challenged classes in our community. So putting a bus stop for tourists ahead of some of our local year-round workforce, just saying it out loud is what helps me see Ms. Scandies' point. Thank you for your time.
Mr. Steininger.
This might be more of a question for clarification. If I'm reading this right, it looks like there's an existing $300,000 available balance in CIP already for this project. Is that correct? And if so, what?
Sorry, through the chair, I'll defer to the finance director because she's now mouthing at me, which is better.
We do, Mr. Steininger, we do have a CIP dedicated to covered bus stops. It does have $3,000 in it, but that's for in general, not like targeting this one, and this one. It's not. So think of it almost like a general maintenance fund, but those dollars are directed towards addressing covered bus stops. And I'm sure that Dr. Koch has a method for working through those.
Follow. And the $300,000 and isn't marine passenger fees. Okay.
All right, we have an amendment and we have objection. Ms. Wendell, you call roll.
Thank you, Chair Wall. On the amendment to strike the $70,000 allocation for the covered bus stop at Mendenhall Loop Road from the passenger fee proposal, Assemblymember Hughes Scandies.
Yes.
Assemblymember Atkinson.
No.
Assemblymember Kelly.
No.
Assemblymember Smith.
No.
Mayor Weldon.
Yes.
Assemblymember Steininger.
No.
Assemblymember Hall.
No.
Assemblymember Bryson.
Yes.
Chair Wall.
Yes.
Amendment fails, 4 ayes, 5 nays.
All right. That brings us back to the main motion. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would move that, knowing that we have I would move that we, in out years for marine passenger fees, program in Capital Civic Center funds. I'm gonna just say to the discretion of the director. Actually, I'm not gonna say that. I'm gonna hopefully my motion shows that MPF be done for the Capital Civic Center in future years. And excuse me, it needs to be next year. It should be in like next year and the year after.
Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm objecting because, and I'm looking at staff as I'm objecting and thinking out loud. Giving that direction now as to what our director should put in there, between now and then, we always have the potential for new assembly members, and we set budget direction at the budget retreat, or at the retreat. So maybe I don't understand what you're trying to accomplish here, but.
Shall I speak to my motion a little bit, Madam Chair? Thanks. As we kind of heard, staff probably often are using a divining rod to figure out where they want us to go. Sometimes our direction is very clear. Sometimes it is nebulous and they interpret it a different way. My motion is to say, program marine passenger fees in the next year CIP, and I'll leave it up to their, as they balance the other priorities. I'm not going to say do 10 million or 5 or 3. I'm going to say, look at the different priorities. Part of the reason for a timeliness on this is that the agreement between CLIA and the City and Borough of Juneau regarding the Capital Civic Center $10 million was entered into on March 14th, 2022, and it lasts for 5 years. The agreement could be extended, but so that would leave this year's budget, which would go into 26, and if it goes to March of 2027, that would be an FY27 budget. So I think it's important now to say, put some money in for the Capital Civic Center in the FY27 budget before this 5-year project happens. And then, of course, so I put that in, the new assembly would have the power to remove it should they desire. So no, it's not like you're binding anyone. That assembly this time next year could keep those funds in or remove them. We'd end up
Because staff are making confused faces, I might send it out over there just to make sure this is clear to everyone.
I just want to clarify, I think where this amendment is coming from is the inclusion of the 6-year department improvement plans in the CIP. And in that document, we foreshadow, we try to foreshadow, okay, what's the 1% that the voters have approved? What streets are we going to need over the next 6 years? And those change over time. But that's, so if this amendment were to pass, we would include in our foreshadowing for the current CIP, not the resolution that you passed, but the document the bigger document that lives online, foreshadowing that appropriation in future years. So it's a little bit of just it's our planning document, and I think many members of the public brought up that there was no mention of Capital Civic Center in that planning document for the broader 6-year CIP.
Ms. Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple questions for staff, but I'll start off with Ms. Pierce. Without clear direction, someone mentioned nebulousness, and I feel like this is a great example. How would you land on a number to put aside in next year's budget?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess I would take that from Director Pierce just because save her on that one a little bit. I think Capital Civic Center is, I guess I'm going to back up. When Director Pierce talked about how she considers her passenger fee budget, I guess I would add from the manager's office perspective that politics is involved in that, and if there are funding requests that are heavily supported by the body or seem to be politically sensitive, we have we are less likely to go out in front of the body in those requests. And I think Capital Civic Center is a good example of that, which is why you do not see it, which is why I did not recommend it in the 6-year CIP or in this year's CIP. That being said, if the intention was given by the body to include it, that would give direction. And I'm not sure where we are on the funding years, but then I would work with Director Pierce on our funding availability and make sure that our document reflected getting to that $10 million within the 5-year frame. Does that help clarify kind of, as I think the Deputy Mayor said, we're always kind of trying to divine, there's a little bit of trying to feel out the body when we pull these requests together.
And if I would just add to that through the chair, if I may, when we create this budget, we take the requests that kind of form the core of the budget, the city services, the third-party grants, and the capital projects that are coming from the departments that, we know we're kind of an immediate need. And then we kind of allocate additional funds to larger ticket items. So, when I talk about the Seawalk and shore power as not being exact numbers, and being numbers that we can play around with a little bit because they're not based on any sort of estimate for work that needs to be completed, if the body would like us to consider the Capitol Civic Center as one of those, then, then we can. But that's kind of what, beyond the manager's discussion about kind of political influences and trying to divide what the body wants to see, that's kind of the other approach that we take to larger ticket items that don't have kind of a discrete project attached to them for the next fiscal year.
I'm going to pause for a minute. I maybe going to turn to staff here. I think we're out of order. I'm not sure your amendment is really on this motion. It's probably its own motion because you're talking about not this year, you're talking about future years. Am I following Mr. Smith? We can take it up after this.
Slightly, well, because it's like, it got in my mind that we talk about marine passenger fees after the CIP, and then we went over the CIP, and I'm wondering if the CIP actually had been the correct way to do it, so.
I think you can make the motion that you want to make. Let's just act on the original marine passenger fee motion before we take up this item. I think that'll be cleaner. So we still have on the table the motion to pass the FY26 marine passenger fee plan as amended. Are there any objections? Seeing none, that is so moved. And Mr. Smith, I'll go back to you to try your motion again.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I would move that the Assembly direct the manager and staff to program and use marine passenger fees in the to use marine passenger fees in the FY27 budget and program them as they see fit. And I think maybe I just stop my sentence there. So.
Objections, Ms. Hughes-Candies.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Mr. Smith, for elaborating a little bit so I could follow your train of thought there. I'm going to object. I appreciate hearing staff's perspective. We did hear from the public, or at least we heard from one member of the public, that they were disappointed to not see this in the CIP. And it helps to know your thinking and how you're trying to read this body. I think I'm objecting primarily because I think if we were trying to read this body on this particular issue, it would really depend on the funding source. So, I don't know where this body is in us digging into our pockets on this particular project. And I think that would be a very different answer than how this body feels about this CLIA settlement money or their passenger fee money. And I think that's you could ask a third question, de-appropriating funds, and get another answer. So I think just at this particular juncture in the budget, again, I'm thinking everything in the larger scale of what's happening. This to me is not my priority, and I would be open to talking about this project more and talking about making sure that we kind of know where we are so staff knows where we are. But this doesn't seem like the right time and the right queue up, so I'm going to object.
Ms. Atkinson and Mayor Weldon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm also going to object, not necessarily, because I see where Mr. Smith is coming from on, we have a certain amount of time to put aside marine passenger fees for this project. But I really don't want to constrain the potential marine passenger budget for next year because that money has to come from somewhere. So, starting the conversation with, oh, here's $1 million for the Capital Civic Center, is that $1 million less for shore power? Is that less of the public's input on marine passenger fees? We all are aware that of the Capital Civic Center, and we all can make the choice to put it on the budget, but I hesitate to start there, because I think we know that project exists, we know we can move it. Moving other things back in is a little harder, so.
Mayor Weldon.
I would move to postpone this discussion until next week to give Mr. Smith some time to get some of the information that Ms. Hughes-Gandy was kind of asking about, because I would be the same thing. I support the Capital Civic Center, but having something, what the term used, nebulous, is very difficult to vote on.
I don't know if that's in order. But it's debatable. Okay, so there is it is motion to postpone it till next week. Mr. Smith.
Thanks. I understand this is kind of a weird thing and it doesn't have a dollar figure. I'm not trying to put people in like a position to do whatever. I'm just like, I think it'd be actually useful for the body as well as others. Like, I cannot ask all of you how you feel about supporting the Capital Civic Center with marine passenger fees. So I'm like, anyway, I'm kind of just, I think it might be useful for supporters as well as the staff to be like, how does the assembly feel about that? I mean, I could, and I guess by putting in by making it to be kind of determined as they weigh the basket of priorities, anyway, just kind of looking for honestly a little direction, and I think it might be useful for others. So I'm probably not going to get any more information in a week. I mean, I don't know I've read the agreement. I could ask CLIA what they think. The agreement could change in 2 years. So, things could change, but I'm like, I don't actually think I'm going to get anything more. So I'd probably send my piece and just vote. But so I'll oppose the mayor's motion. I appreciate what I think she is trying to help me. But I'm just not, you just can't, there's nothing you can do for me right now. So.
I'll also object. I feel like I'm ready to speak my piece on this, and I don't think we're going to get more information. I think there's a lot of things to talk about on this topic that we're not going to get to next week either. Next week's going to be pretty full, and I would rather just vote, so I'll be objecting to the mayor's motion. Mayor Weldon.
Since he stated I can't help him, I'll remove my lifeline and withdraw my motion.
All right, we're back to the original motion. I think we have objections. Anyone else want to speak? I'm going to make go ahead, Mayor Weldon.
As much as I appreciate what Mr. Smith is trying to do, it is pretty tough to vote on something that is nebulous. But however, I will vote on it. I will vote yes on it just because I do believe in the future we should be looking at marine passengers fees for the Capital Civic Center. And if everybody recalls, we are back to one building. It is an emergency evacuation building for passengers if something happens catastrophically on a ship. So and they have been agreeable in the past to support it. So I am hoping that we just make it a little more concrete and just build it up over time a little bit. So I would support Mr. Smith's motion.
I'm going to take a moment I will not be supporting this motion. I remember when we originally amended the agreement to allow, with CLIA, to allow this. And at the time, the plan was kind of, $1 million every year from marine passenger fees to this project. That seemed to make sense to me until the Assembly appropriated $5 million of general fund to the project with the intent of making it taking advantage of federal match opportunity. I do not see any federal match opportunities coming anytime soon for that project, and so I will support marine passenger fee. I would much rather spend marine passenger fees on this project, but I won't do it until we deappropriate some of that general fund that we have lots more opportunities for. So that's where I'm at. Thanks. All right, we have a motion and we have an objection. Ms. Wendell, will you call roll?
Thank you, Chair Wall. On the motion that the Assembly direct the manager and staff to use passenger fees in the FY '27 budget and program them as they see fit for the Capitol Civic Center. Assemblymember Smith.
Yes.
Assemblymember Atkinson.
No.
Assemblymember Steininger.
No.
Assemblymember Hall. Mayor Weldon.
Yes.
Assemblymember Hughes Candies.
No.
Assemblymember Bryson.
Yes.
Assemblymember Kelly.
Yes.
Chair Wall.
No.
Motion fails, 4 ayes, 5 nays.
All right, I'm gonna move us beyond passenger fee plan. I've talked to a few of you all that still have changes that you want to make to the budget before this thing's complete, and so I'm going to just open up some space here for a few of you who I know have ideas for things you want to move to the pending list. So things that we haven't are not currently on the pending list that maybe there's a little bit more information we can gather over the next week, and I think it'll be helpful for the body to see all of these things on one list here. So I'm going to start with the two, not yet. I'm going to start with the two committee chairs that got motions made in their committee this week to pass something onto the pending list. So we're just going to formally move those from the committee to the pending list. I'm going to start with Mr. Bryson, who is the lands and L-head, to make a motion for us.
Madam Chair, I realized I did not have an ordinance number to forward. It was just the.
Just a motion will work to the pending list.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move a $1 million allocation for the Clinton Heights Child Care tenant improvements, and I move it to the pending list and ask for unanimous consent.
Any objections? So moved. As the joint facilities committee chair, I am going to make the next motion, so I'm handing the gavel to Ms. Hughes Candies.
Ms. Wall.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes Candies. I will move to the pending list, $735,000 for the Donza Kahini Playground Project site preparation, as recommended by that committee.
Okay, we've heard the motion. We're looking for objections. Mayor Weldon, you have an objection?
I don't have an objection. Can we get recusers or recess for 2 minutes?
2 minute at ease.
Thanks.
Back to order. Mayor Weldon.
Thank you for that. Apologize. That last motion happened so fast, and in my head I was going, "Oh, we have $1 million in the CIP for Floyd Drive and maintenance," but that is other maintenance stuff that has to be done. So it's two different $1 million.
Okay, great. So we heard a second motion after that from the joint facilities. Mr. Kelly, sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you. The attorney advised that I should state this on the record. My stepson was invited into a different alternative program, and we have accepted that invitation, which means he will be changing schools. Previously, I've been conflicted because my stepson was attending Tazakahini. That will no longer be the case, so the attorney has advised that I state on the record I no longer have a conflict.
Okay, great. So you're no longer conflicted. Any objections to adding the site prep to the pending list? Seeing none, it's added.
Other motions, Miss Atkinson.
Thank you, Chair Wall. I would move to the pending list a appropriation of $3.3 million from the general fund to the restricted budget reserve, and I ask for unanimous consent.
Any objections, Mayor Weldon?
Okay, I'm a little lost on, is that what you took out? Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Objections to moving that to the pending list? All right, any other? Mr. Kelly.
So this is the 3.3 million that we took out before, and we're moving it to the pending list for the restricted reserve. And so we'll have further opportunity later if we don't want to go that direction. Okay.
This is just to put it on the list so we can all see what people are considering.
All right, great. In that case, I'll remove my objection.
Ms. Hughes Candies.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to keep everyone in the loop, conceptually speaking, I will say that I am working on a few things. Again, I'm not going to make a motion to add anything to the pending list tonight, but I had been looking at potential sources of funding to add to the utility if there's no change on the utility rates. I know we already set those. So that's an idea.
All right. Anything else? Pending list. All right. That brings us to information only items. Staff, anything on here you want to point out?
Thank you, Chair Wall, if I could. Starting on page 37 of your packet is the pending list, which you have acted on one thing. You'll see that change next week and then added a few others, so you'll see that as well. I wanted to draw your attention to page 39 in the packet, which has your general fund balance. But then also in your supplemental packet, which if you go to page 51, we also just wanted to bring back to your attention, nothing's changed on these, but your ending fund balances for the hotel bed tax, affordable housing, tobacco excise, and then as we've already discussed tonight, the marine passenger fee fund balances are there just for your information. And then if I may, the last item is the budget calendar, which if you'll use the one in your supplemental packet, a couple of updates to that. As we had discussed, we're moving Eagle Crest to next week. We also have scheduled a conversation for May 21st. That's assuming you make it through all of the agenda items next week, and those get put to bed. On the 21st, returning to the conversation of seasonal sales tax. We've also noted May 28th, which is the Wednesday right after Memorial Day, as skipping. Hopefully we don't have to bring that back in some form, but for now, we added that as a skip.
Any questions on those items?
Chair Wall.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that not printed on this calendar, but you will see it on your agenda for next week. We intend to start the AFC meeting with an executive session related to the collective bargaining agreements. So we will start the evening with that conversation before moving into the Eagle Crest conversation and working through the rest of the agenda.
But it will be a short meeting. Just want to make that clear. It will be a very short meeting because a
Yes,
very
the
short
executive
special
session
meeting.
is really just very, very short, just to make sure you're well positioned to make decisions for the rest of the evening.
Thank you for that. Anything else? All right, that brings us to next meeting date, which is next Wednesday, May 14th. And with that, we are adjourned.